to the CSPC Podcast. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And you'll be hearing our voices this semester on the podcast.
Each week, we will focus on different aspects of athlete well-being and hopefully provide helpful tips and tricks to perform at your best.
This week, we have Amy Sercel joining us from the Center of Health and Wellbeing.
Amy is a registered dietitian who works directly with student athletes on campus. Many of you have probably met her before. Hi! It's nice to meet you, Amy. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, yeah, nice to meet you both.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so my name's Lindsay.
I'm Maggie.
And we're interns with CSPC with Kelly and Molly. And we're kind of starting or trying to pick up the podcast series that they've been initiating. So we really appreciate you being a guest today. So we just wanted to get started. If you could tell us a little bit just about your role with athletics and kind of how you coordinate that relationship with student health and athletics and kind of what you do.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm the only dietitian who works for Center for Health and Wellbeing. So the majority of the work that I do is one-on-one meetings with students. That's all students and includes student athletes. So when I'm working specifically with athletes, sometimes they're referred by their athletic trainer or by their coach. Sometimes they just feel like it might be helpful to talk to somebody about nutrition. Sometimes a sports physician will refer them, or Molly or Kelly from sports psych will say, hey, maybe you should talk to somebody about food. So the initial conversations I have with athletes doesn't differ that much from my initial conversation with a non-athlete. I kind of want to hear about their entire life, what they like to eat, how they're fueling. And then from there, we'll talk more about like what their activity is, what their particular athletic goals might be. And then we'll talk through barriers to fueling. Of course, some of them might be similar to their non-athlete peers on campus, but a lot of times it could be more related to like rushing from practice to class, or like not knowing just how much food they need to eat given their high activity levels. So we'll kind of talk through whatever they're experiencing and make a plan to help make sure they're getting the fuel they need.
Yeah. What are some of the common barriers that you see with student athletes, kind of with both, time management obviously is a big one, and also just, meeting nutritional needs?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the two I mentioned, I think are two of the most common ones. So simply not knowing how much they need to eat. A lot of the athletes I work with do eat with their team, which is great. But if they've got like a non-athlete roommate, or if they've got friends who aren't athletes, they might say, oh my gosh, my friend eats this and I need to eat like 3 times that much. What's going on? And it's just they're using that much more fuel, right?
Right.
I think their schedules do tend to be a lot busier. So if they like practice for 3 hours and then they have all their classes stacked back to back, making sure that they can either stop and get something like to go in a dining hall, or they're bringing snacks they can eat during classes. Accessing food for the students on campus can be tough. And then, there's always the nutrition myths that everyone hears, just kind of not knowing, like, is it true that you shouldn't eat carbs? No, it is not true.
Right.
But
especially for an athlete, not true.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people will ask me about that and like sports nutrition supplements and like whether they need those and how effective they might actually be. So not exactly a barrier, but just a common topic of interest that athletes might have.
Yeah. With supplements, is there any like common supplement that you always recommend in a like wider sense? Or like what do you usually see there?
Yeah, I mean, vitamin D is one that I tend to recommend just across the board. Here in Vermont, we can't make it in our skin from like now until March.
Yep.
We're probably not spending that much time outside with skin exposed anyways this time of year. So especially in the winter, having a vitamin D supplement, if you're not drinking 3 glasses of milk a day, is super helpful. Some athletes need iron supplements. That's not something I recommend like as across the board, because iron supplements can be pretty hard on the stomach. But if somebody is noticing like tiredness, headaches, lightheadedness, might refer them to their doctor to get a blood test, check on their iron levels, and if they're low, adding an iron supplement makes a big difference. I tend to take the perspective that foods are better than supplements, just in general. So trying to get athletes to get the fuel they need from foods first. But if they do need a supplement, whey protein isolate is a good protein source that they can add to a smoothie that they might be making, or like a yogurt parfait, to just kind of bump up their protein intake.
Yeah.
Creatine is a really common supplement that there's more evidence now that it can be helpful for endurance athletes too. In the beginning, or at least when I first heard about it, it was more of like a strength and power athlete focused supplement. So sometimes if people really want that extra edge on their, I think about it as like getting that burst of activity or that burst of energy.
Yeah.
Creatine can be helpful. It's not really something that I tend to recommend. It's more if someone asks me about it, then we'll talk about ways to go about adding that as a supplement. Because again, I think like focusing on eating enough food throughout the day, getting the food groups that you need, that's going to make much more of an impact on overall health and athletic performance versus someone who's not eating enough. Adding a creatine supplement is like putting a Band-Aid on a wound or something. It's not going to make the long-term difference.
Yeah.
For
Much
sure.
bigger issue.
Yeah. You were mentioning like focusing on getting your like what you need through your food. With dining halls, do you see a struggle with meeting that just with what food is prepared each day and like the variety?
Yes and no. It's interesting. I feel like with the dining halls, people either love them or really don't like them.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of in
Polarized.
between.
Yep.
So the people who are fine with them do great. You know, people who are maybe less picky eaters, they're more able to be flexible, because there are options from each food group available at every meal period. Sometimes it's, you know, about getting a little creative, asking for the chicken from one station and the grain from the other station. And, you know, if you're looking at the simple serving station, an athlete will probably need to take 2 plates from that to get enough.
Yeah.
So in that situation, I think dining halls are great options. And there are some athletes I work with who continue to get the unlimited meal plan even after they move off campus because it makes it so much easier. You don't have to have the time to grocery shop or to cook. You know that there are balanced meals available for you. I think it gets a little more tricky for athletes who might have dietary restrictions, whether that's like strong food preferences or whether they have allergies or something. And in those cases, we'll try and come up with strategies to help them get what they need as best as possible. Anya Egan is a dietitian who works for UVM Dining, and she's amazing at giving athletes like tours of the dining hall so they can find stuff. Yeah, like if there's something that they are not finding that they wish they could find, like talking to Anya can be super helpful because she can either show them where it's located that they didn't know about or potentially see about ways to like get it for them in other strategies. So yeah, she's great. Yeah, does that answer your question? I kind of got off
It
track.
totally does.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a great resource to
Yeah.
have on campus directly.
Right.
Do you see a lot of the students who do move off campus and don't continue to do a meal plan? Do you often see kind of, obviously there's a time management barrier there of needing to meal plan and things like that. How do you see kind of that play out in older students still wanting to fuel properly?
Totally. Yeah. You know, it can be a learning curve for people who have never had to cook for themselves or never had to grocery shop at all. So we'll kind of talk through like where do they grocery shop and how do they make a grocery list? And yeah, I have a bunch of recipes that I'll kind of share as starting points and say like this recipe should take you 15 minutes. It's mostly microwaving pre-cooked rice and like cooking frozen chicken breasts and frozen vegetables, you know, like kind of building up those skills as people get into cooking, because there are a lot of like time-saving strategies that can be pretty helpful for someone, either if they just don't have a lot of time or if they don't feel confident like chopping vegetables and making like a full meal for themselves in that way.
Yeah, it can be intimidating, definitely.
Right. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
And kind of more of a basic nutrition question. When you are meal prepping or like trying to get meals from the dining hall, how do you see like the most effective kind of spread of meals, like eating like a bigger breakfast or like snacks in between? Like when you're using that much energy, how do you like keep that fuel at a efficient rate?
Yeah, I mean, it will depend on when someone's practicing and what their classes are like, but typically trying to spread it evenly throughout the day is super helpful. And that does tend to mean having like a pretty substantial breakfast, also a pretty substantial lunch. The biggest pitfall, I think, is if somebody misses breakfast or misses lunch, then all of a sudden dinner rolls around and you have to eat like 2 meals worth of fuel to not be at that energy deficit.
Yeah.
So, doing as best as possible to not miss meals and include snacks between each meal too. For some people, that might mean like 6 more evenly sized portioned, mini meals or bigger snacks throughout the day. Other people might have like 3 big meals and then 3 smaller snacks throughout the day, depending on like their preferences and their schedule. But yeah, doing as best as possible to spread it evenly throughout the day and not limiting yourself based on any sort of like time window. I always say trying to have your last snack maybe like an hour before bed, so that way you've digested it, but you're not going to go to bed on empty. I think there's a lot of like nutrition myths out there about how long someone should wait between when they eat and when they go to bed, and for an athlete especially, that's just not helpful.
Yeah. Do you see that change at all on competition day specifically, like kind of fueling before, during, and after? Or do you have any kind of tips for the day of competition?
Yeah, good question. Again, it depends on like what the sport is and when the competition is. A lot of people are a bit more nervous on the day of a competition, so choosing things that might be like a little bit easier to digest, or maybe things that are more like comfortable go-tos. I always say like the day of the competition is not the day to like try the new thing that you've never had before. Because there's, maybe it doesn't agree with your stomach. And second, like it's helpful to be able to predict how a food is going to make you feel. The day before your competition, it is helpful to kind of fuel up. If you've heard the term carb loading, if we're going to talk about what that means in specific, it's more than just the day before the competition, but definitely like you do not want to be at an energy deficit during your competition. So making sure you're getting like a pretty substantial dinner with more carbs, maybe like 2 to 3 fist-sized portions of a grain at that dinner, and then a carb-rich evening snack. And then in the morning, if your competition is in the morning, try and have a breakfast. Maybe it won't be quite as substantial as like a post-workout breakfast would be, but have something that's also carb rich. So like cereal or pancakes, if that's something you enjoy, some fruit, maybe some oatmeal, with some protein. If you've got a few hours between your breakfast and your competition, you'll be able to digest everything you're eating before competition. So like yogurt or nut butter or eggs should be totally fine. And then, about an hour or so before your competition, having some more like easily digested carbs, like maybe a handful of dried fruit or a banana or a handful of pretzels, just so that you're like topping off your energy stores. You're not going into your competition empty, but also all of those things should be pretty gentle, so you won't be still digesting during the game or race or whatever. And then, of course, if you're competing like in the evening, have a substantial breakfast, maybe have a more like carb-rich but bland lunch, and then still do that carb-rich snack before.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about barriers to athletes getting what they need. And we were just talking with Kelly about fueling stations. Is there anything you would want to see like the department or just like the program go in a specific direction when it comes to fueling stations, either like on the road, in the athletic complex? Like what would that look like for athletes?
I would love if there was a fueling station in the gym. There used to be one before COVID. Even then, it was just a snack. It wasn't quite enough. So I would love, in an ideal world, if there was a fueling station where an athlete could grab like a rice bowl with protein or a smoothie or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a couple of snacks. All of those would be like starting points for a meal. When I think about a refueling meal, I think of like a main entree and then a couple of sides to make sure that you're getting enough energy to replenish everything that you burned through during your practice. So yeah, in that ideal world, I would love if there was something that would just provide more like meal type options for athletes. That would make it so much easier for the athletes who are rushing from
Right.
practice to class.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were just talking with Kelly about how we had never even thought about that you actually have to leave the building to find a real meal.
Right. Or
which
time
is
manage bringing
right,
snacks, they're
right,
prepping.
and then that takes time. Yeah.
Yeah.
With that sort of recovery piece, do you have any tips for athletes sort of on the after, whether it's competition or just practice, kind of what the timing of meals look like and how substantial the meal should be?
Yeah, so trying to eat a meal, as soon as possible after practice. If you can't eat a meal within an hour of practice, then have a snack as soon as possible and then get the meal as soon as you can. Everyone always thinks of protein after exercise. You do need protein after exercise, but I always say when athletes meet with me, if there's one takeaway, it's that carbs are key. Yeah. So if we're going to go with the official sports nutrition recommendations, it's 3 parts carb to 1 part protein in terms of your ratio. So like 3/4 of your plate being grains or fruit, and then 1/4 of your plate being protein. A yogurt parfait, like yogurt with fruit and granola, could meet that ratio, or like a bagel sandwich with an egg and some meat, and then maybe having some carb-rich sides with either of those. Portion sizes will vary depending on how long someone's worked out for and like their individual nutrition goals, but definitely like a meal type portion where you're kind of filling your plate with food. And that would be ideal.
Yeah. On the track of like refueling, when there is a practice that goes longer, at what point in that practice should athletes be having a snack, and what should that snack look like while you're still moving your body?
Totally. Again, carbs are key. I always laugh, the official sports nutrition recommendations would say to refuel with carbs every 20 minutes during activity that lasts more than 90 minutes. Yeah. Because as you're moving, you're using up your muscle glycogen stores, and refueling with carbs means that you're not going to be breaking down your muscle tissue. You'll be giving your body more energy to use for fuel instead. I know that that's not super practical for most of the athletes I work with. So I always say at the very least, trying to eat something between practice and lift if you have a break, or if you're doing that back to back, or like if you're doing certain drills and then there's like a break when your coach is explaining the next thing, like drinking some Gatorade or like having a handful of raisins or something. Easily digested carbs means low protein, low fiber, and low fat. And so that might mean like fruit, especially dried fruit, tends to be a pretty concentrated source of carbs. The fiber tends to be pretty easily digested for most people. So like raisins or dates are pretty convenient options. If you want to do something that's a little bit more like flavorful, like gummy bears are a good option, pretty high in carbs and not super high in any of those other things. I think I said pretzels before. Pretzels with salt are great because that's a good electrolyte. If your digestion is more sensitive, like if you're worried about having food in your system while you're moving, liquids are going to be super easily digested. So like a sports drink like Gatorade or Powerade, or like diluting some juice with some water that you can sip on throughout practice will be super helpful.
Yeah, with that, obviously liquids and hydration in general is super important. Do you find that hydration plays a role in sort of meeting the other nutritional needs at all? Like does that, or kind of just making the athlete feel ready to compete? Do you find that hydration is, it's obviously a big part of that, but how do you find that interaction to play out?
Yeah, a lot of athletes already know how important hydration is, so that's not something that I've had to make a main focus with many athletes that I work with. Usually you guys all have your water bottle with you all the time that you're constantly refilling. But definitely if you are dehydrated, you will feel bad. Potentially headaches, low energy, decreased reaction time, all of that. And if you're feeling thirsty, you're already dehydrated. It just like with fueling throughout your practice, you want to be sipping on some type of fluid throughout your practice too, just to keep that hydration status a bit more baseline. And then like thinking about competition the day before a competition, making sure that you're drinking throughout the whole day similar to food, trying to like spread it out evenly because it doesn't really feel good to drink a whole bottle of water and then try and do
Yeah,
anything.
definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of shifting away from the hydration piece, do you work with a lot of injured athletes, and how do you kind of see the nutritional needs change in injured athletes who aren't actively exercising but still are recovering?
Yeah, so when somebody is injured, it kind of depends on like what they're healing from, and it depends on how long their recovery will be. People tend to have this idea that, oh, I'm injured, therefore I have to really cut back on what I'm eating. And that's not really the case. When you're injured and you're healing, your metabolism is higher. Like as your body builds up new tissue or heals from whatever the injury is, it takes more fuel in order to do that. So it is still really important to eat on that same consistent schedule throughout the day. An injured athlete just may find that they don't need to eat quite as much. They may find their appetite is a bit lower, and so listening to those hunger and fullness cues can be helpful. They may find like carb needs will be a bit lower because they're not moving quite as much, but you still need carbs. They're the main source of fuel that your brain wants to use. So instead of having like 2 to 3 fist-sized portions of grains at a meal, it might go down to like 1 to 2 fist-sized portions at a meal. Still a good proportion of what you're eating, but maybe just not quite as much as you would if you're thinking about fueling. And then depending on like whether it's a muscle injury or a bone injury, they might want to think about like certain supplements or like prioritizing like certain foods to get specific micronutrients too.
Yeah. When a student faces an injury or any other just kind of barrier in their life, do you find that it's more often that they come to you, or is there like a team in place or like communication between you and the coaches where you like kind of work in a preventative sense?
Mm-hmm. Like preventative before they develop an injury, or like
if they become injured, do you already set up a meeting to be like, oh, this is what your nutrition is going to look like differently, or do you only step in once there's like an issue?
Yeah, so I've had athletes come to see me like before a scheduled surgery so they could kind of make that plan in advance. Other times I think it really depends on if the athlete is expressing concerns to their coach, then the coach will refer them to me. In order for me to communicate with a coach, I would need the athlete to like sign a release to make it like legal, literally,
Yeah,
for me
right.
to have that conversation. So it would have to be something that the athlete was more open to. If they're talking to their athletic trainer about an injury and that they're having questions about nutrition or having trouble fueling, then the athletic trainer might schedule them to meet with me. But yeah, I haven't really been brought in like earlier on in that conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is that I know Kelly and Molly told us that when all new athletes come in, they do like a general intake and just kind of assess everything. And then from there, obviously, if students are flagged for anything, then they'll come to you. But is that sort of how the process works in general? Is aside from that, if they're not flagged, then otherwise they just come to you? Is that kind of how the process works?
Yeah, so when especially first year athletes, because they have to do that like pretty extensive questionnaire, but then every year I think athletes get a smaller version of that questionnaire. So if they're flagged for anything in relation to like fueling or eating, then typically they'll be scheduled to have a conversation with me and then the team physician and then sports psychology, so we can kind of get a full picture on what's going on and make sure they're well supported and like plugged in with resources. So that way, even if I talk to them and they're like, actually things are fine, and I'm like, yeah, sounds like things are fine. They know me, they know where to find me if things become more challenging later on. So that's one way athletes might get connected with me. But yeah, after that, it's more like as they're living their life as a student, if they're running into barriers, they can schedule with me or they can talk to anyone, like their coach, athletic trainer, Molly, Dr. Lunser, and then they might say, hey, it sounds like you should talk to Amy, and then help them get on my schedule.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would just give as like a general tip that you either see a lot or like is on the front of your mind often? Any like misconceptions or just general tips?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think general tip I'd say to most people and especially athletes, like trying to avoid going more than 3 or 4 hours without eating something, especially as an athlete, like you are constantly using energy. And if you go long stretches of time throughout the day without fueling, then that's going to just mean it's harder to make up that deficit later on. So carry stuff with you all the time. Carry granola bars, trail mix, cheese and crackers, peanut butter and crackers. All of those are like portable snacks. So that way, if you need it, you can have it. Most of those things are going to last fine in your backpack. So if you don't need it, it'll be there for tomorrow.
Yep.
So yeah, I think just like it's very hard for a college athlete to over consume, but it's very easy for a college athlete to not eat enough. So just making sure that you're offering yourself food regularly throughout the day.
Do you have any tips specifically for new students, for first year students who are just, adjusting to college and eating in dining halls? And obviously there's a lot of emotional things related to that as well. Do you have any tips from things you see commonly with first year students?
Yeah, like make food fun.
Yeah.
Go to the dining hall with friends or call your family while you're eating in your dorm.
Yeah.
Check out all the options that are available, like peruse all the stations before you grab a plate in the dining hall, but also try and go to all of the unlimited places and all of the retail places early on, so that way you'll know what all of the options are available to you. Even I know it's about halfway through the semester, I'm seeing some first years who just haven't gone to any of the retail places on campus yet.
Yeah.
And I think those are a really good like alternative to the unlimited dining halls.
Yeah. And if students want to schedule a meeting with you, is the best way to do that to email you, or is there a place they can sign up for an appointment, or how does that system work?
Yeah, they can email me. They can also go through the My Wellbeing portal, so mywellbeing.uvm.edu. Sign in with the net ID and password, and then you can schedule an appointment with me. You can also find other appointments through CHWB, like Michaela, our health coach, or a meeting with a primary care provider. So it's a great health portal if you haven't already checked that out.
And do students, when they do that, do they have to notify their coach all of that if they're an athlete, or do you have to contact the coach at all?
No, like I said, it's actually like not legal for me to tell the coach that they've met with me unless they sign a release. So they don't have to notify the coach. We do share the medical record with, the team physician and Kelly and Molly, so they might see like that we had that conversation. But, oftentimes it's helpful for there to be that whole like cohesive treatment team anyways. There's a lot of overlap between nutrition and mental health and physical health. And of course, I'll refer students to team physician or sports psychology if it seems like any of the concerns that they're bringing up are more like medical related or mental health related.
Yeah. Well, that's great. If we don't have any other questions, I think that was all of our questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time on a Friday.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It's nice to talk to you both. Enjoy your weekend.
It was nice to meet you. Yeah, have a great weekend, and thanks for joining. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found some new useful tips for fueling.
Next episode, we will have Kelly Thorne and Molly Gribben on the podcast to talk about CSPC and mental health and well-being.
Find us on Instagram at UVM_CSPC for updates and future episodes. Thanks.